All right, so it looks like we're live on YouTube. I'd like to call this May 7th meeting of the Templeton Advisory Committee to order. Here's my little gavel. Can we do a pledge of allegiance, please? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, so first on the agenda is approval. Debbie sent out two sets of meeting minutes. Did anybody get a chance to look at those?
I did.
Tom?
Yes,
Debbie, did you get a chance to look at them as you wrote them? Just kidding.
Yeah.
Okay, anybody have any comments on them? All right, so let's take these separate. I'll take a motion to approve the minutes for April 16th.
So moved.
Oh,
Second.
Bob, I'm sorry, forgot you were on. Everybody else is in
It's
front of
easy
me.
to do, Tony. It's easy to do.
I apologize. Okay, we have a second. Bob,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Deb,
Yeah.
Lee,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. And I'll take a motion to approve the meeting minutes from the 30th of April meeting.
So moved.
You have a second?
Second.
Second.
Okay. All right, so Bob,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Deb,
Yeah.
Lee,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. All right, thank you for that. Okay, so next on the agenda is the town administrator. He wanted to talk about a couple different things. I did put them specifically on here because this way it gives latitude if there's anything else that he wants to. He wants to talk about a couple different things. One is the revolving funds, and one is vacation and rolling over vacation. Because of COVID, people can't take their normal vacation. So Carter, if you want to go ahead and take it from there, I will go on mute and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Yes, the first matter is the revolving funds. We have two inspectors, the electrical inspector and the plumbing and gas inspector, who are paid 80% of the permit fees with a not to exceed amount. On the electrical side, that's around 12.5. On the plumbing side, that's plumbing and gas, that's around 7,500. In the normal course of events, that has proven sufficient. But this year, the building permits are on a pace where they're going to blow through that cap. So we have two options here. And I would just remind the advisory committee that it's a change in the statute of about 2 years ago under the Municipal Modernization Act, which now allows the caps to be increased during the course of the year with the approval of the select board, which they did at their meeting, and we included that in your package, and with the approval of the advisory committee. So we're seeking your approval to raise those limits, and I'm going to ask Lori to speak to the limit that they would be raised to and the pace of building permits, if I might, please.
Right now, what we're looking at is I'm hoping to raise the limits to 17.5 for the electrical inspector and 12.5 for the plumbing and gas inspector. Right now in the pipeline, we've got about 10 applications for new build residential homes. We're hearing that there'll be more homes being built on Brooks Road. There's more lots on Hubbardston and Caruth. It doesn't appear to be slowing down at all this year. Unless you have any specific questions.
Yeah, I have a question, Lori. So do
Sure.
you think between now and, like, say, we're 1 May, we're only 2 months before the Is this for starting now or is it for next fiscal year?
It's for next fiscal year, but it's also for this year too.
Okay, so you think that, well, I guess as long as they don't go over that amount, plus the money comes from the actual permitting fee themselves, right?
It does.
Okay. Right.
And Tony, if I might, this is the one of the final changes to the warrant that we pointed out when we sent you the final. And in Lori's memos, a nice little grid that gives you a sense of what other communities are paying, because we have a lot of folks like you all working remote and such. So this would increase the limit for this fiscal year and then would be the same that we would use for next fiscal year, assuming that warrant article is approved as proposed.
And it's really no cost to the town, so.
No, we pay them 80% of the permits and 20% of the permits goes to the general fund. And if it does go a little bit over that, that's the cap of their salary. The only thing that we do is on projects that are just extraordinary, just out of the normal realm, such as the elementary school. We do make a special provision for that type of project, should one like that come along again.
Okay. Anybody on the board have any questions?
No.
No? If no one has any questions, then I will entertain a motion to approve raising the revolving funds, electrical to 17.5 and the plumbing and gas to 12.5.
So moved. Second.
I have a second. All right, Bob,
Yes. Yes.
Deb,
Yes.
Lee,
Yes.
and I'm a yes.
Thank you.
Yep, absolutely.
Thank
That's
you,
an easy
Lord.
one.
Thank you, Lori.
All
Have a good night.
Thanks,
you.
Lori.
Thank you, too, guys.
All right.
Take care.
All right, so
Thanks.
Carter has one other item, at least one other item that he would like to talk about, and then I'd like him to stay on when we discuss the Scout Hall.
So the second matter that we brought before you is not one that we need a formal vote on tonight because we don't know the exact amount, but we are seeking to know if you will be agreeable should we proceed forward. And that is the matter of vacations. When this event hit, we had a number of people who, by no choice of their own, had vacations canceled out from underneath them, starting in late February to early March. I myself had this happen, and in addition to having had the vacation that you planned canceled out from underneath you, it was not possible to make alternative plans because there was no place to go. So we have a couple of choices here. We could offer a complete, in fairness to the employees. Now, there's a slightly different agreement in each union contract and in the personnel policy, but we're trying to take a blanket approach to this. So we could offer to roll everybody's vacation over completely. The challenge there is that's going to be in the area of 3,250 hours, we think. And that would mean that all of these departments would have to absorb that lost time in fiscal 21. We don't think that is feasible given the lean staffs that most of our departments operate on. The second option is to offer as a gesture of goodwill towards our employees and of understanding that this was totally out of their control, is to allow everyone to roll over up to 1 week of vacation to minimize the impact on the organization next year, and to then buy out the balance. This would be done in the last paycheck of the fiscal year. We think that collectively across the entire organization, if that were to be done today, that would probably be in the 30,000 plus or minus range. Now, if anyone is able to get away for a few days here or there, that number will fluctuate, go down a little bit, perhaps. The third option that we have is to just sort of say, well, we have these policies, you all have to apply individually, and you have to prove this, and you have to show that, and the select board has to vote on every single application one by one, and then we deal with the police union, have a provision in their contract, and the DPW has a provision in their contract, and so we could do that, though this event is of no one's making, it's of no one's fault, and we're not believing that that's really a good way to deal with these employees, the vast majority of whom have continued to report to work faithfully every single day on the front lines here. So the challenge here is that we would be right up against it. We would make this transfer very late in the fiscal year. And that would be too late if the advisory committee was not agreeable to supporting the transfer to support all of these settlements, if you will, these payments, if you will. So what we're asking the advisory committee tonight is to indicate whether or not they would vote the appropriate amount in probably early June to mid-June, once we have the final amounts known. And we laid that out in our memo attached to the revenue and expense projections, the impact of the COVID. I think that was Exhibit B, if I remember correctly.
So are you talking about interdepartmental transfer, or are you looking for a transfer from our emergency fund?
No, these would be interdepartmental transfers. We believe that there will be enough to cover this, but we're not looking for a transfer from the reserve at this point in time. Come the end of June, if there aren't sufficient funds to cover all of the interdepartmental transfers, then we would come to you folks, but we just don't think that's going to be needed at this point in time.
Well, I think this late in time, if we're looking late, mid to late June, transferring our fund or from another fund really is sort of the same thing, because what's not there is going to go into free cash. So, okay. Anybody on the board have any comments or questions?
Yes, I do, Tony.
Okay. Or I see.
I think the most financially responsible issue would be to allow them to all roll it over. I think that with the reduction in state aid that's going to be coming down the pike, I think any additional monies that can be left in accounts, they're going to be needed. I think then you could just charge the individual department heads with, being able to manage their time around, and if they have to run a little short here and a little short there on staffing wise, or because somebody's taking a vacation or taking days off, you've given them the opportunity to spread it out. Maybe they don't approve, more than one person at a time, or at this point, I think to institute a buyout in the last month of a situation where we're really not sure of what we're going to have for numbers, I think might be a little challenging to what we're going to need coming up in the next few months. Just my opinion.
Tony, I have a question. Actually for Carter, are employees ever normally allowed to roll over time? Like, so let's say they rolled over all the hours that they had this year, and then next year still had a balance. Are they ever allowed to roll time over?
They are, when the need for the rollover has been the result of workload and the absence of staffing. Those requests have to be made one by one. They go to the select board. Those are for the personnel. There is no provision for rollover in the public works whatsoever. I don't recall the dispatch right off the top of my head. The police are allowed to roll over a cumulative 4 weeks amongst the entirety of them. And then if there are dollars remaining with the approval of the chief and the town administrator, the remaining balances can be bought out from funds within the department. So it's really a mixed bag depending upon, are you non-union, which union are you in?
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I might.
Of course.
My question's also for Carter, excuse me. So if I'm understanding this correctly, if we were to pay the employees for the vacation time that they have on the books right now, this year, the money is in the accounts at present. Am I correct there?
Yes.
Okay. All right, very good. My concern, let's say with our policy, because I know we've talked about this a couple times in the past. I remember specifically, I think Holly rolled hers last year, because she had excess work at the end of the year. It was either last year, year before, maybe. But my point is, I understand with the excessive workload, I just know that there's going to be questions if we allow folks, let's say, who had their vacation plans canceled, but still could take their vacations. I think we're going to have some, let's say, discussion on that from the community. If we went with that route. My personal feeling from what I'm hearing is I would rather, in the circumstances that we're in this year, I think it would be best off to just pay them for their time not used this year, because carrying over to next year just puts us in a very similar boat right off the bat, as far as I'm concerned. We, go in and some of these folks, from what I remember reading, have, multiple weeks of vacation at present left over. And so they'll have multiple weeks again next year added to that. The chances of us being thin, like Carter said, in employees and being able to handle one employee missing for 6-8 weeks is going to be interesting.
Conceivably, some of them could be. The cumulative impact across the organization is what concerns me. And let me just say, if I might, Bob, you're correct. They could. Yes, they had their plans canceled out from underneath them. My trip was canceled, and I could have taken that vacation time. But frankly, I want to thank them for not having done that, because we would have been leaner staffed during this event, which would have been unfortunate. So I just want to extend to them my thanks that they did not do that.
That's good if that was the case. That's very good.
Yes.
But now, so if I might just quickly before I pass, if we were, do you see any downside to us covering all the vacation that's due in this fiscal year, I should say?
Well, had they all been able to take their vacation, and had we dealt with vacations in the normal processes, we would not be expending this $30,000 plus or minus. So free cash for fiscal 20 will have a modest impact. Those
Sure.
dollars that you expend will now not be available for free cash. So you're really balancing a modestly reduced free cash in fiscal 20 against having more time taken off the books in in the face of possibly leaner staff times. And, you know, this event, I don't want to lose sight of the fact that this event is not over. It's not going to become June 30 and all of a sudden everything's fine. Next September, October, November, I'm not an epidemiologist, but everything that I'm hearing is that there will be another cycle of this. So those things need to be balanced out. Leaner, more vacation time being taken next year in the likelihood of another prospect and possibly lean staff versus a slightly leaner free cash for this fiscal year. I think that's the balancing act that you have to do.
Thanks for clarifying my muttering.
I have a question. So unfortunately, I mean, people are in a position where they, you know, we're going to plan to go wherever and they can't. So that's not their fault. So we should try to make, I feel like we should try to make some type of accommodation for them if we can. You know, I think vacation's vitally important for people to take, whether you decide to stay at your house or, you know, go to Florida or whatever. I'm trying to figure out, so Carter, if, like you said, if this comes up again in the fall and they roll over vacation and then they can't take it then are we right back here next June with even more and possibly more of an impact?
If we allow them to roll it all over to next year, and we get hit in, you know, hopefully we get hit earlier in the season. The big thing right now is that nobody knows.
No.
When will therapeutics be available? When will vaccines be available? We just don't know. We are trying to plan against a very murky picture. But you're right, Tony. If we take the path of letting everybody roll over 100% of their vacation, and then we have situations next year in which they cannot be taken again, how many times can you double down on accumulating that vacation? It's a challenging balancing.
Have you polled the different department heads to see if they've polled their employees of what their preference is?
Subject to all, to whether or not your board is agreeable to a transfer, all three labor unions have agreed to this proposal.
So, well, okay, so you put three different things out there though. Is there a prevailing one that you want to go with?
What we are proposing is the one that allows anyone who has vacation to allow 1 week into the next year. There is one employee for medical reasons be exempted and be allowed to roll over the entirety of their vacation.
Okay.
Then the balance, whether it's 3 days or 2 weeks, would be paid out in cash.
Will they be given an option if they don't want to roll it over, or it's you roll a week and everything else is paid?
It's basically the three unions have agreed. The non-union personnel do not get to make that determination. So with the side letters in hand from the three unions, the only contingency in it was that this board would fund it. If this board believes that it's better to have that slightly larger free cash and to try to manage the workforce with the vacations rolled over, then I think we'll go back to the select board and we'll look at that approach. But it's not a case by case, the employees get decision. Okay. This is a blanket across the board end result.
All right, so from a board perspective, does anybody have big heartburn with 1 week of rollover and then paying out the balance. That could be up to
So
$30,000.
Yeah, I'm curious, was there any analysis done? So 1 week, 30,000. Did we look at 2 weeks by any chance and what the financial impact of that would be?
We did not, because we were trying to minimize the amount of time, vacation time that was being rolled over, quite frankly.
Understood.
We're trying to avoid that potential impact next year.
Sure, I totally understood. But again, this is a fine line mix of how much time versus finances. So I don't know if there's any way to get that number, because if it cuts the number in half, from 30 to 15, just as an example, not saying it would, but maybe for those people who would prefer not to go down that path, that might be something that would be more amenable to them.
I could crunch the number, but I would have to go back to the 3 labor unions.
And
Okay.
then
Certainly
Lee, I
from
think
an-
the other thing, one of the other things I think you have to think about is by allowing them to roll over a week, now it could be short-staffed because people have taken an extra week. If you allow them to roll
Oh, sure.
over 2 weeks, that could exacerbate that problem.
No, I think it was mentioned though that would be up to the leaders of those departments to
Yeah.
make sure that it's a staggered approach. Tony, you and I, we deal with the same things ourselves in the commercial world. So,
Yep.
Again, this is just a weird situation because we're trying not to do an all or nothing on either side. We're trying to find that good mix, and maybe it is 1 year, 30,000. Again, I'm just curious as to what the numbers would look like. But anyway, okay.
If I can, it is challenging for the department heads because, for instance, Public Works has had 3 employees out on 2 weeks of extended paid sick leave
Sure.
under the COVID Act.
Yep.
And when you have basically 6 people in a department and you put 3 of them out for 2 weeks during the prime time of the year, that's challenging. So
Oh yeah.
we've got great department heads. I'm sure that they would do everything they can to keep things going. So I think that you could take some comfort in the skill and professionalism of the management of the department head should you decide to go with that approach.
Okay. Yeah. No. Without a doubt, definitely not questioning anyone's skills here at all. Just again trying to find the right mix for everybody. And yes, this is a challenging time for sure.
Carter,
Is there-
if I might ask a question here, Tony. Just to follow along here, what we're talking about with the rolling over. And I don't want to, I'm not trying to jump on any person. This is just only the name that comes up. But if I'm not mistaken, at the beginning of this budget cycle or earlier in the budget cycle, I think this year, Holly presented a letter requesting rollover time because she had 40 hours remaining from last year that was rolled over and still over 40 hours from this year. Now, this is just my memory going here, but if that's the case, that just makes me even more concerned for rolling overtime at this point for more employees, because as you've stated, we do run, in a lot of departments, we run short-staffed or, what you want to call, bare bones. We don't have excess capacity. We don't have additional staff. So people, naturally, because we do have conscientious workers, they stay and they do their job, and then we end up in this situation. Do we have a number, Carter, on just paying them off at the end of the year?
In their entirety?
Yes.
Oh boy,
Those are the folks on the vacation.
Yeah, to say to everybody, okay, the bad news is we're not rolling anything over. The good news is we're paying everything off in cash. Bob, I'd have to get that number together. I don't have that off the top of my head.
Yeah. Hey, Bob, let me give you an example. I know of 2 members of the police department that were going to be on a trip abroad back in April during April school vacation that because of this, they couldn't take. So, you know, here's a couple guys that had some planned leave that couldn't take it. And I don't think that they should be penalized. I think that if the majority of the employees, and this is my opinion, would like to roll a week over and then be paid out, I think I would be in favor of that because, you know, they need to have their vacation time and be able to do those things that they want to do.
Well, if I might then, Tony, that takes away the argument for, I mean, I'm playing devil's advocate. That takes away the whole argument for your vacation got canceled. Because then you need the time off, you need the time off, not to go somewhere.
Well,
So that's just.
that's not what I mean.
And I do agree that and I don't look at it as punishment because you roll over till next year, then you have next year's vacation on top of it. So then you have your 3 weeks from this year and your 6 weeks from next year, and then you're taking that all in 1 year.
Well,
That's not what vacations are designed for. They're designed for mental health.
yeah, I mean, I don't know how much vacation people get in the different departments, to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, we're just talking about rolling over a week, and I think what they're trying to do is make a good faith gesture.
I understand all that. Just, looking out for the back end.
Yep, I understand. This is a tough one.
I think, Tony, this is Deb. I think, I don't know, I lean towards rolling over 1 week and paying out, if that's something we're willing to kind of split the difference between that and free cash. But I guess I would caution or wonder what, if this does make a second comeback in the fall, those same arguments of, hey, I had a vacation planned and I couldn't take it could also come back up depending on how next year plays out. So I think there just needs to be an understanding that, yes, we can do this year. This came out of the blue. Nobody was ready. And this is kind of an unprecedented situation, but it is the situation moving forward. So there just needs to be an understanding that vacation, regardless of whether you're able to travel or not, or how you're using it, still needs to be taken, if, when and how possible. That makes sense.
Yep, does.
Tony, may I comment on that?
Of course.
I understand Deb's concern. I do think that we need to keep in the back of their mind that, let's say we have a widespread, we need to deal with this incrementally as we learn about this event. I understand what Deb is saying. At the same time, we don't want to today take a hardline position of what we think where we might be in October and November, because I don't want to have somebody say, oh, so you've already made a decision and you're not going to roll over any vacation time. You're not even going to be open to that. And I'm not saying that's exactly what she's saying. And then I have 2 police officers and a firefighter who say, okay, fine. Then I am going to sit home. I am going to use my vacation. If you're not going to help me and accommodate me, and now I am down some frontline staff. So we're trying to find a balance that acknowledges this was not of their making, is a good faith gesture towards their service during a troubling event, and looks into the next year in trying to minimize lost time in the departments. And there's arguments on both sides, and it's a tough balancing act, I think.
So you don't know, like, how many town employees would be rolling over a week? So if someone only had 4 days or 3 days to roll over, that's what they'd roll over, right? So
Correct.
and then get roll over to week, anything in excess of a week be paid for.
Correct.
So, but
So
you
if
don't
you
really, I mean, do you have a list of everybody? I mean, I don't need anybody's names, but do you have a list of how many people would be rolling over a week? Or
I do.
And then
I do. Unfortunately, I do not have that with me tonight. My apologies.
that's right.
I believe in that list now would be it'd be accurate.
No, well, right, because there's still 2 months.
The next 2 months, so a month, at least month and a half, it'd be nice if people were able to take some time off. And I know people that have been going to work every day throughout this whole thing with the town,
Yeah.
maybe ready to take a few days here and there if they can. And I'm sure that once the things start to open and department heads can shuffle them in to have a day here and there, I think psychologically it's going to be the best thing in case there's another round in the fall. Hopefully there won't be, but all signs point to that. And if we can get some of these frontline workers to take a day if it's available when they can, I think that's going to be a good thing too. And not just getting them to take the cash. Everybody loves the cash, but if they can get a day off here and there, it's going to be beneficial to the town.
Right. Is there
If I
anybody?
might,
that's-
if
Of
I might,
course.
I think Tom's spot on that everyone's looking forward to knowing what's going to happen and, be able to go out to breakfast or do whatever it is that brings you a little peace in mental health. So we would certainly encourage those folks to try to take their time, and we would run this down to the very last minute possible to try to minimize the amount of cash that was paid out.
Is there anybody absolutely against rolling over a week and buying out the rest?
No, I'm good.
Lee?
Yeah, no, again, as far as a fine line between things, I can see both sides, on the, extreme sides. But yeah, again, we're trying to find a mix here, and it sounds about as close to as good as anything we're going to get. So I'm good.
Yeah, Tom?
I'd be fine with that. Originally, I was a little skeptical on it, but I have no issues with being able to kind of split the difference and move forward like that.
Okay, Bob?
Pretty much the same. I mean, it's not my my pick, but
Yep.
it satisfies all concerns.
Okay. And I would be for it also. Don't want to speak for Will or Amy, but I just feel bad and it's not just the people of the town. Obviously, we're dealing with that, but most of us on here are dealing with the same type of issue that, you might want to go somewhere this summer, but you really can't because you can't. So, I'm fortunate my company allows me to roll over the time. So I'm not really worried about it, but not everybody's like that. And so I think that I think helping out the town, the employees of the town who really are working short somewhat and really do, I think, a really good job for the town that whatever the best accommodation for them is what we should go with, but that's my opinion.
Tony, we do have one comment coming from the live stream from Faith. The question, shouldn't this request come with more information, such as how many hours people have and what the total cost would be for each plan? So I just want to recognize that comment.
Sure, absolutely. Thanks for the comment, Faith. Right now, I think Carter said he doesn't have it with him, but he has an approximate. But between, there's still about 8 weeks between now and the end of the year. So those numbers could fluctuate a little bit. So, I mean, some people might just decide, you know what, I'm taking today off or whatever. So when the time comes for the transfer, we're certainly going to want to know all that information.
One thing to Carter, I'd like to, in the future, I know you went through the unions and got their approval and their blessing on this. Would it be possible to also poll the non-union members? I know that they may not have that negotiating right, but they're just as important to the workforce in the town as the union members. I do think that's could be just a courtesy thing that they'd appreciate. It may not make a difference in any decision, but at least they get their input to see if they're really all for it or against it.
Sure. I understand, and we didn't go down to the employee level, but we did have discussions with all the department heads in a department head meeting. But I understand your comment. Thank you, Tom.
All right. Anything else on that? Carter, you satisfied with the? I think-
I am, when we come back to you, we will provide you with the additional information of the what ifs. What if this, what if that, when we fine tune that number a little bit.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, next, had a member ask to put Scout Hall on the agenda. So I will let that individual take it away.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman. I asked you to put Scout Hall on the agenda, basically because the Board of Selectmen won't or hasn't. And I say that in that tone basically because on April 8th, during the meeting, my letter that I wrote to the Board of Selectmen was brought up. There was concern from board members, statements of, we have to talk about this. This is for a workshop, and it's going to be on May 6th. So there was, let's say, preparing that went on. And there was anticipation by people of the meeting. On May 1st, I noticed that the meeting was not, or on the agenda, Scout Hall was not posted. And I contacted Adam and made him aware, also the board members, that Scout Hall was not on the agenda. I was told that it would be looked into. And that was the last I heard, and it never was placed on the agenda.
Could you go into a little bit more of what you want looked into?
What I want looked into is basically how this happened and why are we proceeding like it was all legal or legit? Because it sure don't seem it to me from my seat.
And are you referring to
And
how the
I'm
funding was
referring
got?
to the actions of the chairman of the Scout Hall Reuse Committee, the, let's say, DPW director and our town administrator. The actions involved with the three and the actions that evolved from that are very troubling to me. Because, a lot of, let's say, problems arise when you look at the information. And I want to know how a self-imposed chairman of a committee that doesn't meet and didn't vote to go to CPC, how it makes it okay for her to go and talk to the town administrator. The town administrator asked, didn't tell, asked her to go to CPC, and she does, and gets funding. Then that funding package is presented to town hall. Now, I don't know if I'm just a stubborn whatever, but if you do part of a process incorrectly, everything that follows it is wrong. You had no right to do. So I just want to know how we got to the right to actually approve the financing, to bring that financing package to town hall. Because to me, that seems like deceit. Because even in the package that Carter had presented from the attorney that he had review, that said the Board of Selectmen is not the overseer of the Scout Hall Reuse Committee, that they could spend money on their own. There's just steps and problems and inconsistencies throughout the whole thing. And I just think they need to look at it, and somebody needs to be held accountable for why we're here, why we're at $100,000 when the package was 50 initially. And now we're at 100, and we didn't even have the committee that was supposed to do this, vote for this. Holly got most of the estimates, town employees got most of the estimates. They weren't even supposed to be involved in this. You know, this was supposed to be the Scout Hall Reuse Committee handling this, not Holly, not Bob, not Carter. So, you know, how do we do another project in town with any certainty? I just don't know. And I think our Board of Selectmen has let us down over and over again with errors and holding people to account. And personally, I'm tired of it. So that's what I wanted to say on Scout Hall. That, you know, I think it's a fiasco that is just being let go because it's easier. And, you know, nobody wants to rock the boat.
Bob, can I try to sum that up?
Sure, please, because I have a hard
Okay.
time.
Okay, so I think what you're saying is estimates were got and an amount of money was needed. I think it was like $50,000 more. There is a Scout Hall Reuse Committee, but doesn't meet. The chairman of that committee went to the CPC and got the money, or got them to approve the money. And the Scout Hall Reuse Committee can spend the money how they want without any oversight. Did I miss anything?
Intent.
Okay. I mean, I didn't think that
There
that
was initially, I don't believe there was any estimate. They pulled $50,000 because that would be enough. This was going to be
Okay.
done with T-shirts at one point. Laugh, whatever. Bev said this. I remember it being brought up in town. I was not in favor of the Scout Hall from the beginning. I still am not. You know, I think if we're going to do it, there's certain provisions. The other provision is TCTV is on the CPC application. The intent was them to be in the building.
right.
And
I
all
know
I've
that.
heard since is it's been an argument. So if we actually intended to spend the money to put TCTV in there, it should happen and nobody else should have a say in it,
I concur with that.
you know?
So I hadn't heard that there was any issue with that recently. I thought the plan going forward was they were going to occupy at least part of that building for studio space, et cetera.
Tony, may I comment?
Of course.
So first, let me address what I think is, after you set aside all the other questions, the major question: how do we keep this from happening in the future? And that is going to require, one, that the community and the select board follow what is now in their operating procedures. That is, that no committee should be created without a clear charge and composition as to what they're to do on what kind of timeline. This was a committee that was named and was told to basically go take care of the $50,000 on Scout Hall. There was nothing in writing. There was no clear direction. The next thing that I would say is the way that you deal with something like this in the future is to go through a programmatic review. There is no written program anywhere for this building. There were some hopes, there was some, maybe this will happen, maybe that'll happen. But even the committee itself never settled fully exactly what was to happen in that building. Form follows function, and it was done backwards. Now, we did present a report on April 1 to the select board as to a series of the events. All of the bids were done and procured in accord with Chapter 30B. And on April 8, the select board put a hold on all future expenditures until such time as the Office of Community Services could develop a program for the building. Now looks like it's going to take more time than we'd originally planned, because quite frankly, Jackie Prime is consumed with food pantry and a lot of other things because of this event continuing on. So if folks follow the advice and the policy, that should substantially reduce the chance of this kind of thing happening again. Happy to share those reports again, but beyond that, there's really not much more I can add.
Carter, could I ask you one other question related to what you just said? The estimates, quotes, and so on and so forth, the time spent on those, was that charged to the Scout Hall Reuse Committee?
No,
Okay, so that was paid for by taxpayer money.
as was Alan's time before, and as was Holly's time in getting the quotes. Yes, yes.
But that's what I'm saying. And that was not part of the project. As it was described at Town Hall, this was not a town employee project.
I'm
No,
not
we're
sure
spending
wherever.
ta- What? Go ahead, sorry.
No, I didn't mean to interrupt you. My apologies, Bob.
No, I was just saying, it's just, there was no intent for the town workers to be involved in this. That was not the intent. It was literally supposed to be taken away from the town for the Scout Hall Reuse Committee to do this. Now, granted, it took a long time and so forth, but I don't believe if you asked anybody at town meeting or who was involved in this, if Holly was going to be involved in getting quotes or Bob was going to be involved in getting quotes or estimates. I guarantee you the answer would be no.
Bob, you may very well be right, but in the end of the day, you asked how we got here. And we got here because the town has not set up good, clear processes to establish what is the purpose of the project. Do we have good cost estimates, and how's it going to be handled? That
So-
is
so that-
That's true, Carter. But I have what, a selectman, the chairman of the reuse committee was a selectman. It wasn't Joe down the road. This is a selectman who was basically your supervisor. And they come to you and ask you a question. You said you asked. Those are your words. Now, how does that fall under the chief administrator's job duties to supervise, direct, and be responsible for the efficient administration of all departments, employees under the jurisdiction of the Board of Selectmen? Because as it was said, the reuse committee was under the Board of Selectmen. Just a question,
Could I add to that, Bob?
please.
I guess, Carter, taken for what you said, that there's really no project plan for what they want to really do with it. What are they going out getting estimates for? If you don't know what you're going to use it for, how do you know what estimates to get? Now, if it's simple stuff like if it's simple stuff like, okay, it needs a new roof that, you know, some, no, I don't want to say cosmetic, but maintenance type things to bring a building up, just what you have to do, I get. But I mean, I don't know what estimates that Holly went out and got, and
Well, Holly did not get the estimates. She got the quotes when we were asked to do it. Whether it was demolition, it was new drywall, it was electrical work, whatever it was. This is a building in search of a purpose.
is it historical?
In and of itself, no, but it does contribute to the historic district.
Tony, we got a couple of comments.
Hmm.
Mike Curry is on the live stream. He says the issue is undeveloped and non-financial in nature, procedural at best. And Faith states that it wasn't a legitimate manner that they received the money. No meeting, no voting, one person acting on their own.
That's what it appears. I mean, Carter, can you address how the chairman of the Scout Hall reuse committee had, who authorized that chairman to go and seek out the money?
They did it on their own. There was no functioning committee at that point in time. They had
So-
struggled to have quorums. They had canceled a number of meetings.
So that doesn't
Mike,
seem like it's a valid request. I mean, I don't think, I mean, that would be just like, you know, this happened in the town before where a building a loan was taken or something on someone who really wasn't even authorized to do it. I don't remember the exact details of that, but I guess what authorized that person to go do it, and then how did it get to the point where it actually got voted on? It should have never been voted on. People were paying attention to how it was done.
It was presented to the Capital Planning Committee. It was then presented to the CPC, and it was then presented to the town meeting for a final vote. Are there a lot of lessons to be learned in this? Yes. But I don't think it's truly comparable to the other situation in which the
No,
person
no.
a loan without any authorization from any entity whatsoever.
No, I understand. I understand. It was more to the point of someone going to do something without authorization. Now, obviously, getting money from a fund that has money and committing the town to owing money is obviously quite different.
Yeah. So I think if I might, that you have one of three options in this. The advisory committee could do a management review of how we got to where we are and put that memorandum together and vote upon it and say this was not good practice and this should not be done again, and there should always be a charge in composition and these other things. That could be done. You could say, okay, it's done. We're not going to deal with it anymore. And that's an option. The third option is to continue, Bob, don't get all crazy on me here now, to gyrate on it, because you've raised your questions, you've had your answers. So what are we going to do with those answers? I'd be happy to work with you, Bob, and you know, to put together that management review, perhaps one other member of the advisory committee, and that would be fully within the scope. But to just keep grinding on it is not getting us anywhere, and it's certainly, Bob, not getting you any satisfaction that there has been some acknowledgement or some thoughtfulness put into a working paper that is of record.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree that this is not giving me any satisfaction. It's just another time I see Templeton not holding anybody accountable for doing anything. It ticks me off to no end that Julie was allowed to do this. And I mean, allowed, and I say allowed, because as you said, you asked. And then when she came back with the money, you knew. And still, you put it on the warrant before town hall. That pisses me off, excuse my language. But that really does, because we pay you good money to do this. Do we not?
You do pay me a sum of money to do this work. And
Yeah.
I am more than willing to discuss and defend or explain the actions that we took. Now, we've
Were
been
they
going
legal?
around- Pardon?
Were they legal
Absolutely.
on all
Right.
levels?
In my opinion, they were.
Okay.
Now, I don't think that we're going to get anywhere here tonight. So my suggestion is, if this is of some interest to you, and it certainly clearly is, and you think there are some lessons that could be or should be learned from this event, then why does not the advisory committee charge you and or one other member? And I'm happy to work with you on it. I truly am, Bob. I'll give you the straight answer from me, and put together a lessons learned. This is probably a 6 to 8 page memo, and it goes in the record. But to just keep circling around on it is not productive. There are no lessons learned being presented to the community. And it is simply a time suck for the fellow members of your board.
Then maybe the Board of Selectmen should have dealt with it.
Carter, if I may, what you're saying, that you're willing to move forward with Bob's request by, as far as looking into it and making sure that the lessons learned, so we don't make this mistake going forward, that you're willing to put this project on, say, the next Board of Selectmen's meeting to move it forward and see where it stands at this point? Is that the lessons learned that you're looking to move forward with?
I'm not suggesting it go on a select board meeting. I think this is the kind of thing that's frankly very appropriate for the advisory committee. You're charged with the, reviewing and commenting on financial and other matters. The selectmen have my report. There was no action deemed needed upon it. And what came out of that was a directive to prepare a program for the building. And once the program was known, then we would revisit the cost estimates. So from their vote on April 1 and April 8, this is done. Now, Bob has concerns that he doesn't feel they've addressed. So going back to them and saying, hey, you guys voted on this on April 1, you voted on it on April 8. We don't think you really dealt with it, so we want to go over this all over again. I really, truly don't think that's going to be productive.
They didn't vote on
However-
it April 8th.
I'm sorry, what?
Said they didn't vote on it on April 8th. They said to move it to May 6th on April 8th.
I'll have to go and check the
It
record,
was,
Bob, but
yeah, you go right ahead. I watched it last night.
okay. So their resolution to date has been to direct the Office of Community Services to prepare a programmed use. So you basically have your answer.
Okay, all right, let me ask you a question then. How much money right now is in the Scout Hall fund, if you will?
Approximately 59,000, 60,000.
And who is authorized to spend that?
No one is authorized to expend it at this point in time.
Okay,
So you're saying that with the Board of Selectmen being, according to you, out of the picture at this point, are you saying that the advisory board then is authorized to forward that committee?
The committee has been disbanded. There's a freeze on the expenditure of monies. And no monies or effort will be taken on physical items until such time as the select board is presented with a program for the use of the building. Once there's a program for the use of the building, you can develop the final cost estimates to, if you're gonna have a kitchenette, if you're gonna have X, if you're gonna have Y. So that's forward looking. That's not gonna get to what Bob wants. And my suggestion is that if the advisory committee would like, and Bob is willing to work on drafting that lessons learned report, I would be more than happy to provide input to him in his preparing that report.
Bob, are you
Fine,
able?
And the advice,
If
Can I
I
jump
and
in
the
there really
advisory,
quick?
please, go ahead, Deb.
Thank you. We just have a couple of comments. Terry Griffiths is also on the live stream. She said that there are plans, ask TCTV. And Faith made an earlier comment just acknowledging that she would like to see accountability for the situation to ensure that things like this don't happen again in the future. So I just wanted to recognize the comment. But Terry did say there are plans and to ask TCTV. Thank you.
Thanks,
And
Deb.
if I might, the thing that I want to make clear is that all of this that has happened even though we have policies against it. We have policies on how to do it that weren't followed. That's why I don't see any point into this, well, what somebody did, or how we don't do this again. If we don't hold somebody accountable for what they did today, they'll do it tomorrow. It's just the life. And I'm good if we want to just leave it with, we don't do anything in Templeton, I'm fine. That's good. And I'm comfortable with that, but don't tell me otherwise down the road. That's all I'm saying.
Hey, Bob,
Carter,
can I ask you a
who's
question?
ultimately responsible for ensuring that the town policies are followed? Who,
there was no
today, there's somebody that's
policy.
responsible. Who is it?
There is no policy on this matter. Therein lies the entire point. The selectmen created a committee, they named some people, and they basically said, okay, go ahead and take care of it. There was no charge and composition. There was no provision of, you have to go get all your own bids, but you're going to need to follow procurement. There was, at the end of the day, no policy. Those are the lessons that could be learned. You can't hold somebody accountable for violating a rule if there was no rule. That's
They
the
didn't need a
challenge.
vote of the committee. They didn't need a vote of the committee to go to CPC. Isn't that a
In my
policy?
opinion, they did not. No, it's not a policy. There's
It's
no
not a policy for
on that
committees to
matter.
vote. I'm sorry, I'm done.
So Bob, I have a question. It's not devil's advocate, but it's more of, I understand that there should be some accountability, but what is that accountability? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, I like the fact that Miss Ridges hasn't been at a meeting for months. I think that should have been required. And I think, there should have been some public statement from the board to Carter. Some condemnation of his behavior. Because it's not acceptable. And at this point, I think we should just, roll on with Adam. Myself.
All right, so I think we've
That's
gotten
where
to
I
the
stand,
point.
Tony.
Okay, thanks, Bob. I think we've gotten to a point where we're starting to get into more of a circular argument now. So does anybody else have any comments on this? I would just like to say that I think the Board of Selectmen, as the elected officials of this town, who are really mostly responsible for the proper spending of taxpayer money, are the ones that should be finding out what happened, why it happened, how do we prevent it. That's my thought. All right, if we have nothing else on Scout Hall, next on the agenda was budget. I don't know if anyone wants to talk about that with Will not being here. Hope Will's doing well. I'll take that as a no. Any old business?
Actually,
Tony,
Tony, on the budget, I do have one quick thing.
Oh, sure.
The, recently, as we're reviewing the budget coming down the road, I know, it came out that the state's approximately, $5 billion with a B in the, short when it comes to giving out, town aids. Back in 2009, it was only 4 billion short, and it was approximately, 28% of a cut. So I think when we're formulating the budgets, we need to realize that next year's state aid is going to be about 35% less than what we're currently expecting. Reviewing through the expected revenues, state revenues, I think that our number is going to be almost a little over $600,000 short of what we're expecting.
And I'm sure
Just to
Carter,
keep in mind.
okay, I'm sure Carter and Adam are tracking that.
well, the challenge, if I might, is we honestly don't know. Because the projections themselves are so fluid. You can talk with one economist today and you can talk with another tomorrow. But Tom has identified correctly the one threat to your budget. Your property taxes, your local fees and assessments, even your motor vehicle excise are all going to be fairly stable. And it's very likely that you will exceed the markers on excise. You've exceeded the markers on new growth and in a number of other areas. So if the state aid is cut by around 12 to 15%, you're probably okay. The challenge is we just honestly do not know. We've never seen anything quite like this. There's an interesting white paper from the Pioneer Institute I'll circulate out. Quite frankly, we're probably not going to know until into August and September. There is great hope on two things that might take care of FY21. The first is there's a strong belief that the state will tap its $4.5 billion stabilization fund to try to offset that $4.5 to $5 billion in revenue loss to try to stabilize things. The second hope is there's a strong belief in many quarters that the federal government will do a COVID-4 piece of legislation, which would push some dollars out to states, towns, and local governments. I have to say that I'm not horribly concerned about FY21. My larger concern is the out years, 22, 23, 24, when you lose those safety valves. We just don't know. Tom may be on the mark. We honestly do not know.
We definitely don't know, but in return to that, I think that, yes, we definitely have to plan out for 22, 23. But if 21 is going to be so short, and just looking at the trends in the past, I think that you're going to realize that it's going to be. The state has tapped into its reserves before. However, it's not going to go below $1 billion in the reserves. It will only drop to, I wouldn't even estimate the same as 2009. So I think that we need to be very cautious when it comes to putting this upcoming budget forward, And a lot of anywhere we can see expenses that we all know things go forward and budgets are adjusted a little, but I think the numbers coming in you're correct. It's very unsure, but we know that they're going to be short. There's no question of that. And even the federal money that's coming out, they can't keep printing money and just saying, okay, poof, it exists. We're doing that now, but it's not going to last when it comes to the towns. It may drift down a little bit, but it won't even, it'll be under, say, under $1 million for any community as far as.
The challenge is, how do you, with any degree of certainty, let's say that you wanted to preemptively cut the budget at the annual town meeting, and I want to speak to that in a minute if I might, Tony. The challenge is we just have absolutely no idea with any degree of certainty without prematurely perhaps eviscerating services across the board. I think if I recall, the 08 downturn was a 28% reduction in local aid. I'll double check on that, Tom. We could absorb probably something on the order of a 15% plus or minus reduction by adjusting other revenue estimates. But yeah, we could end up, I think, personally, I think closer to a 10 to 15%, but we have no way of projecting this at this point.
You're correct, Carter. The town in 2008, 2009, it was a $4 billion shortage for the state at 28% cut in local revenues. Right now, they're currently looking at a $5 billion. So, I mean, I was just using my basic math, at 7% going up, you're looking at, I think we're looking at approximately a 35% cut in local and state aid.
And the way we build the budget estimate, we do have an opportunity to absorb much of that shock with a one-time change. My concern is to prematurely start laying people off and cutting that budget. When I have no degree of certainty as to what number I'm trying to hit. I just don't know what to say, Tom.
Definitely, I agree. It's premature to start, laying people off and those kind of things. But I do think that it's good for for you to get the word out to the department heads that this is what potentially could be happening, and let them start looking at, because they may need 1, 2, 3 months to start really evaluating their budget. When they start looking at their budget for the upcoming years, they start in, as you know, late fall, early fall, looking for the following year. So I think this is a good time to make sure that they are aware of what potentially might be the shortcomings. Nothing worse than going to fall town meeting and saying, or early spring town meeting and saying, well, we approved a high budget. Now we got really severe cuts.
Yeah.
So I think that might be something that we just need to make sure we move forward with.
We do a continuing review of that on the revenues, but we have got to be honest with ourselves and with the community. The money is in the people. At the end of the day, when you look at those expense budgets, there's not a lot there, and trimming them by 5%, 10% is not going to get you where you need to be. The money's in the people, Tom. It's just, we will have that under a continual review. Hopefully, we'll know more within 30 days prior to the annual town meeting. But I do think this is going to be a fall town meeting. I'm not going to say fix, but I think that's where it'll end up landing.
As I started to look forward with how things will work if we're unable to hold a town meeting in the upcoming month, we're kind of unsure at this point if we'll even be able to have a meeting of more than 50 people in a place of gathering. What's the contingent plan on moving forward if there is no town meeting?
Sure. Tony, may I speak to that? Are there any other questions on the budget I might try to address, or may I speak to Tom's question?
Go ahead, because that's a good segue into a comment I was going to make.
Okay.
Or how about let me make my comment real quick. So at our last meeting, I said that the town meeting was the 17th with the election the 22nd. Those are the dates set by the select board. However, as Tom mentioned and Carter's going to address here in a second, they're, I guess, as solid as mud because of the situation. We just don't know. I know they're looking at ways of accommodating everybody and opening up different parts of the building to have people in there, but it's still going to be a challenge. And I was just going to ask you, Carter's, if decisions are made right now, I think it's June the 5th, without a calendar on the top of my head, or the first Monday in June that will hold the pre-town meeting. So if we don't think we're going to meet that 17th, we'd like to know so we can postpone that.
So here's where we're at. Let me take the annual town election first. That must be completed by June 30, period, end of story. Unless they pass different legislation, that cannot be put off. So we have been working with the town clerk to try to make sure that when we have the election, that we have made a mailing to everyone ahead of time, trying to encourage as many people to vote early, absentee and early voting. There will be added staff at the election itself to keep social distancing, to make sure that everyone entering is taking the proper precautions, that after each voting booth has been exited, we've wiped it down. So Carol's working through all of those kinds of things that she thinks we can reasonably do to try to reduce the number of people that come to the election while still getting a robust turnout, a robust participation of the voters, and make it as safe and comfortable for people to come out and vote as possible. If you had a chance to look at the requests that we made to the Department of Revenue for deficit spending authority, which they did approve, we budgeted about $5,000 towards that. So now let me address the annual town meeting. That was set for May 13th in accordance with the bylaw. The moderator, after consultation with the select board and public safety officials, has the ability to delay it by up to 30 days. That meeting was held this afternoon. Town council, town clerk, town moderator were involved in that. Town council prepared the appropriate notifications and consultation forms. And that May 13th has been deferred. I wasn't in on that, so I don't know exactly, but I think it was into like the 5th of June or something like that. Shortly before that date, they will then look at where everything is. What has the governor determined? How many people can meet? Where are we in terms of all of the kinds of protocols that we would need to meet? And the moderator will make a second deferral of the town meeting to what we hope will be June 17. Will it be June 24? Will it be July 1? We don't know right this minute because we don't know the lay of the land. We are, however, really fixated upon trying to get a budget by June 30 so that we can avoid the 1/12 budget. The challenge in a 1/12 budget for us is that close to 12% of our budget goes out the door in the very first month. And there'll be substantial amounts due out the door in August as well. Quite frankly, we can't operate on a 1/12 budget without furloughing employees. It simply can't be done if we're to meet our legal obligations for payments for insurance, the retirement system, and our bonded indebtedness. So what we've been doing is Superintendent Cassavant, actually he and his staff literally marked out a grid in the gymnasium, whether they did it on paper or, painter's tape or whatever. The gymnasium, the high school gymnasium, can hold 197 people, all on 6x6. He's going to do the same thing with the cafeteria. The auditorium does not work well because people have to kind of like walk past someone in the rows, which doesn't work for our purposes. So we think we can find a combination of rooms, the gym, the cafeteria, the 2 gymnasiums that can accommodate the town meeting within 6x6 social distancing protocols. So the challenge becomes, what are you going to do if the reopening rules that we hope to see in the next week or two say, but you can only have 50 people at a location, or you can only have 25 people at a location, or something like that. So we've asked the superintendent, and this may sound a little bit out of left field, to see if we can pipe in via YouTube or some other medium, Zoom or something else, live stream the town meeting into individual classrooms with someone in each person. That's probably not going to work well, but it's something we need to explore, and for no other reason than someone will ask us. So it's still up in the air. We are trying to hit that June 17th because we truly cannot go on to a 1/12 budget. And if we go on a 1/12 budget, that means the school district goes on a 1/12 budget also, which is a nightmare they're trying to avoid after last year. So we have a plan. The problem is there's so many variables out there that I can't do much more than say, we'll keep you posted. I wish I could give you more certainty. The only certainty I can give you is June 22, the annual town election.
Hey, Carter, just a thought, but it really kind of depends on the weather. They thought about doing it outside on the football field?
We have, absolutely. It's something we're going to look at. The challenge then comes back to there's plenty of room out there if it's good weather. You can certainly get the 6x6 in there. Is there going to be a cap on, but you can't have any more than 25 people in one location,
Right.
or 50 people. I think that the cap, excuse me, on the number of people that can be in a gathering is that's going to be the hurdle. Finding enough locations to keep people physically apart. The 2 gymnasiums by themselves would work, or the gymnasium and the cafeteria. So some combination of the 2 larger rooms, we can certainly accommodate probably 350 to 400 people, which would be a large town meeting, particularly given there's nothing really controversial on the warrant. So it's going to be that cap, Tony, that really kind of is our barrier to deal with.
I
All
a
right,
little bit
thanks.
disagree with that, Carter. I don't think the cap's going to be as much of the barrier as is the community ready to have for the people to want to come out to go to a town meeting and take part in voting. I think that we can stick people in a field, we can stick people in multiple rooms, but is that truly the right way to go when you're looking to see and have the members of the community, which we are a fairly large elderly community? I don't think sitting in a field is the way to go. I think that's a difficult thing for them. I think we really need to, check all the avenues. I don't know if if it's been checked with the Department of Revenue, if there's certain exceptions that can be made to the immediate bond payments that if there's certain agreements that need to be done with, pension payments that need to be made or health insurance payments that need to be made right off the bat. Are there exceptions to these, or is there, can there be certain requests made through the DOR to ease this in the pandemic state that we're in so that local communities are able to postpone their meetings a little bit, but hold to where they still can function financially?
So the three major expenditures in those first 2 months, Tom, are Worcester County Retirement System. To date, they have indicated they are unwilling to change the fixed date. So we have two payments we can make. The first is the amount that we carry in the budget. If you pay by June 10, 12, somewhere in there, it's approximately $25,000, $30,000 less than if you pay it in installments. A number of managers have approached the Worcester Regional Retirement System. To date, the answer is nope. You either pay the whole thing or you pay the whole thing plus the $30,000. So, I mean, certainly that's something we can always do, and then we'll have to deal with that $30,000 shortfall in the back. On the debt, if we get closer, we would say to DOR, would you consider that debt outside the cap of the 112? I don't know. We would ask them. And then finally, there's our insurer, Blue Cross Blue Shield. Because it's Maya, they might be willing to do something. But remember, these are folks that are bleeding cash right now in terms of the payments that are going out. After that, we don't really have any major things that could be deferred. But certainly we are looking at all three of them.
Okay, and I appreciate that. It's certainly, I just want to make sure it's being looked at, because obviously, 365 communities in the state, we're not going to be the only ones in this having the same issue. I think that probably a majority are. So I wasn't quite sure if, obviously all the different communities talk together with the managers and that and administrators. Hopefully we just kind of make sure we move forward with what's going to work versus what just cramming something in just to get it done. I want to make sure what's going forward is what's going to go forward with the best for the town for the upcoming fiscal year.
Right now, Tony, if I might, we are having each department head put together their major expenditures in the first 60 days, whether it's software for accounting or the IMC software at dispatch, whatever it is, that's all going on a grid. And then we will look at what we would have to do if we needed to defer. But it's going to be challenging to have the town try to operate.
Plan. I was saying that.
Let's see if I can get 2 months done.
Have them extrapolate that for the whole year. Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you, Carter.
I understand.
Any new business? Okay. No new business. Next meeting will be 2 weeks from today, which will be the 21st of May. Other than that, anybody else have any comments? All right, well, I will accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved
Moved.
Do I have a second?
or seconded.
Do I have okay, all in favor? Aye. Carter, thanks very
Aye.
much for
Aye.
coming. We appreciate it. Bye. Everybody have a good week.
Take care, folks.